All right, guys, I just want to welcome back to the Everything College Football podcast. Today, me and Nick here will be looking at Ole Miss and why they could potentially be the favorites to win a loaded SEC in 2024 with all the returning talent. Another year of experience for Lane Kiffin and Pete Golding working together. This team certainly seems primed and ready to make a legit run at a national championship. And you'll just start with the expectations on this offensive side of the ball. And, they went from 33.5 points per game up to 35. They still have tremendous balance, but the offense wasn't as great in 2023 due to the lack of really a running game. Quinshon Judkins took him a while to get up to speed. He finally did and ended up the year with some great numbers, but, the first month and a half was kind of a tough, go for them on the ground. Judkins transfers out. There's a lot of dispute there with the coaching staff and whatnot. It seems like he had a bit of an attitude issue. Looks like Lane was just, go ahead and get out of here. That's a great player that they just let walk, Nick, and it certainly didn't seem to bother them one bit. Do you think Ole Miss should have made a bigger attempt to keep this player here because the expectations were already running rampant for this Rebel football team? They lose this running back, and I think they're still going to be there, but, man, this certainly dampers their chances of winning, big time in 2024.
I certainly think they should have tried harder to keep a guy like Judkins. When you have a talented player like that you discover really that wasn't getting a whole lot of love out of high school, for him to come into Ole Miss and step in and just be a star during his career for the Rebels, I think it just was a bad mistake for them to let him go. It's possible that he had no interest in staying and certainly I'm assuming he got a heavy pay package from Ohio State in the NIL era and is looking to compete for a national title on that team that has reinvented themselves with the portal work they have done as well. Judkins took a step back this year. Like you said, struggled on the start of the season. Could have found a little bit better stride early on, but he did get comfortable throughout the season. I don't think this offense will skip a beat without him, though. I think there still is enough talent top to bottom on this offense to fix that issue. Obviously, you don't want to lose a player of that talent, but a Ulysses Bentley is still a really talented player. Matt Jones, towards the back end of that offense as well, is available. So I think they'll be just fine on the ground, and Kiffin will be able to scheme up something fine here. You are concerned about losing a guy like Judkins, but I don't think it's the end of the line here at all.
Ulysses Bentley, a bigger back at 200 pounds with some impressive long speed, the former SMU transfer. Biggest news for them, though, is they add Logan Diggs, was playing in his home state last year for LSU as their leading running back in a very loaded room. He stunningly departs, and he transfers over here to Ole Miss, 215-pounder, a violent runner, was very productive for the Tigers, had 200-yard games against teams that finished in the top 10 in this Ole Miss team and Missouri. I think he's going to see a great role here at Ole Miss with the departing Judkins. It's going to be a nice 1-2 punch here. Diggs, though, I think he's in for at least 1,200 yards, Nick. The Ole Miss football team loves its run game. This is a run-first RPO-style offense. Went from 256 to 176 in terms of yards per game. Really need to get back to north of 200 yards if they want to compete, and I think Diggs is going to go a long way in doing that.
Diggs is a great ad for this program. Looked good at LSU, but like you said, a loaded running back room. So he was the odd man out. Diggs bolts and heads for Ole Miss. Looks like a good fit for this offense. I think that 1-2 punch of Bentley and Diggs is a fantastic punch. Plus Matt Jones there as the number 3 back is not a bad guy to have there towards the bottom of your rotation. I'm not concerned about this running room at all. Like you said, they love the RPO down there in Oxford. This could work out great with these 3 backs.
I think the biggest question mark is what level is Jackson Dart going to perform at? He played much better this past year, only had 5 interceptions, completion rating, yards per attempt, and yards per game all went up. Isn't exactly at that Matt Corral level of gashing through the air. I think he's going to take some major steps, though, in his 3rd year in this system. The expectations that he's going to be one of the nation's top 5 passers. At least that's going to be it for me, especially with the weapons he has, Nick, the former USC highly ranked recruit. Has nice arm talent. This guy is also a very willing runner. 8 touchdowns on the ground this past year after only 1 in the year prior. Had, only 389 yards compared to the 600 plus he had in 2022. This guy has shown to be pretty adequate fit at 6'2", 220 in this system. Again, I don't think he's at that Matt Corral level just yet, but I'm expecting him to be a top 5 quarterback in 2024. And if he doesn't do it, I'll be a little disappointed.
I think there's a lot of room for improvement for Jackson Dart. We saw him still be a solid player, 65% comp rate, 3,300 yards, 23 touchdowns, 5 picks. Dart is a good, competent passer, a solid player top to bottom that's getting better throughout the time. Not quite anywhere near the level of Matt Corral. Still has some room to grow, but I think another season in Kiffin's playbook, another offseason working with the head coach can help him out and grow towards that potential.
5 300-yard games a season ago compared to only the 2 he had 2 years ago. The passing attack really seemed to struggle. He wasn't doing a great job of getting it behind the defense, over the linebackers, throwing it in rhythm, and I think you certainly saw more of that this past season. And this is a loaded supporting cast. You just alluded to the running backs they have. You look at what they have at wide receiver as well. 3 of the top 4 pass catchers are back, led by Trey Harris. He had 4 touchdowns in the first 3 quarters of the year against Mercer. Only 4 more the rest of the season. You want to see him hit the end zone a lot more, considering he was on pace for an abundance of that. He dominated the backup corners versus Penn State. He's a really good outside wide receiver. Thrives with being physical and winning those jump ball scenarios. Showcased some nice yak as well. He turned in a 90 PFF grade as a pass catcher this past year. Jordan Watkins, he finally emerged after a couple of seasons of waiting for him to step up. Performed at a high level. Really good separator. Very smooth out of his break. I like his route running up the field. He's a physical blocker as well. A nice fit for this offense overall. Tight end Caden Prescorn missed the first 3 games. Got really going the last month of this season. He dominated Penn State. Only had 313 yards in the regular season. I think he's going to at least double that in 2024. It seemed like that injury certainly limited his exposure to this offense after coming over from Memphis. That's not going to be a concern if he's healthy, Nick. Again, 136 yards, 2 scores against Penn State. Flat out balled out. But you're going to be able to see him over the course of 12-plus weeks this year, and I think that's going to be big news for him. What do you make of these 3 guys they get back?
This is a good rotation they have here with 3 talented players. Trey Harris obviously has the biggest ceiling, in my opinion. I think he's got a lot of opportunity. We saw that against Mercer. He can be a really great weapon and threat. Nearly 1,000 yards receiving in the 8 scores for him. Slowed down a little bit, like you said, but still such a talented player top to bottom. Returning a guy in Harris who's a good leader here, has experience in the system, is a great return for this Ole Miss team. I think he's a great player to have. A nice weapon. You can move him around a little bit. A lot of flexibility. Play him at the X, potentially move him in at the Z if you need to, or in the slot. I think he's overall a great receiver top to bottom and a good weapon for Dart to throw to. Nice communication there to have a guy returning like that.
They also made some nice work in the portal, added Juice Wells. He was great in 2022 for South Carolina. Only saw a few snaps due to injury this past season. Really good route runner, though. An explosive player. He's also really good when it comes to physicality. Isn't exactly a separation specialist by any means, but he's a highlight reel type of player. They also added the top-ranked JUCO prospect in Deion Smith. He was a former 4-star receiver that went to LSU. And I believe Aiden Williams, the freshman from last season, I'm pretty sure he was a pretty highly ranked recruit coming to Oxford. So this is a guy they're looking to get involved in the rotation a little more. This is going to be a team that certainly, I think, competes for having the honors of one of the nation's top receiving cores, Nick. Overall, this is a team that should be putting up, corral-type numbers, 320 to 350 yards per game through the air. I know they have great balance. I know last year was a little bit less of that, but I think this is a passing attack that is absolutely going to light things up in 2024. And if they don't, Lane Kiffin's got questions to answer because the time is now.
Certainly an opportunity for this offense to be successful. Daquan Wright as well, the tight end coming over from Virginia Tech. They slot in there and replaces Michael Trigg, who transferred out to Baylor. So a nice plug in there. I think Wright is a really nice physical tight end coming over from Virginia Tech that could work well in this system. This is a great offense from top to bottom. Kiffin has a lot to work with here. Another offseason with this offense where he can work with Dart pretty much every single day at practice and draw up plays that work and are comfortable for his star quarterback. This offense, sky's the limit here. They can score a ton of points this season. They're one of the best offenses in the country and have a great opportunity to put up more than 33.5 points per game. They could definitely touch 40 with the weapons they have.
The offensive line's certainly been a big issue for Kiffin at Ole Miss. And, in this type of system, it doesn't need to be spectacular, right? But they need some work. They do return a veteran right tackle, Micah Pettis. They do add both starting guards from Washington, the Joe Moore Award-winning offensive line, Nate Colepto and Julius Buelow. It is important to note these two were both the weak links of that unit, though, I would say. They had a great center and great tackles. These guys, just kind of slotted in, as starters that were, alongside greatness. So, they're veterans at the end of the day, and they do pick up Diego Pounds, who was a strong left tackle for North Carolina. All these guys are 6'6", 320 or bigger, so they're certainly bulking up in that size. Left guard, Jaquan Scott. He wasn't great for Southern Miss, but he is coming off his best year. He's also got some size, 6'4", 340. Some nice retooling here on the offensive line. Do you think it's going to be enough to push them over the limit?
Certainly concerned about the offensive line. That has been an issue for this program. It doesn't entirely hold them down, in my opinion. There's still a potential to succeed with the limitations on the offensive line, but overall, this is a unit that is good enough to hold them for this. In my opinion, they should be able to succeed with this offensive line.
Now you look at the defensive side of the ball, when Kiffin first got there, this is a team that's spectacular offense, just abysmal defense. And, at one point in 2020, they're giving up 38 points per game. They've gotten that down to a considerable mark. DJ Durkin helped with that. Pete Golding is here, 22.5 points per game this past season. That's the lowest it's been under Kiffin. This is a defense that's come a long way, Nick. And I was very happy with what they were able to do in terms of revamping them and, getting better against the run. Because, early on the time, really for the entire tenure, the run defense has just been such a sluggish unit and against the physicality of the SEC, that's just not going to be a good recipe. It's going to be hard to be successful. And I was excited for them, going against the Georgia game. I was like, this is their opportunity to see how they can do, how much they've really improved. 300 yards and 5 touchdowns is what they allowed, Nick. Absolutely abysmal. 223 and 3 scores they gave up earlier in the year against LSU in a shootout. Other than that, though, that's the only game they gave up more than 200 yards in was those 2 games. Penn State, they did have 5.8 yards per carry in that contest, but, the play caller over there does not know how to continue to call things that work. So, obviously, Penn State went away from that. Those are 3 games, though, examples of them just not being good enough in the trenches, Nick, not to the level of them being able to win a national championship. You're obviously going to win double-figure games every single year. You're going to dominate, mid-level or above-average competition. But when it comes to facing elite opponents, they're just not there yet. And that's why they've went out in the portal and they've added some great players. Walter Nolan, highly impactful this past season for Texas A&M. Production dipped off a bit in the middle of the year, but for an interior defensive lineman, he was physical, strong player. This is the X factor you want on your team. They're hoping he can come in and be the difference maker alongside Princely, Human, and Mellon. He's been a very respectable run defender for Florida while being, an elite edge rusher for the Gators. The pass rush was a good unit, at least the last couple of years it has been, but they haven't had an edge like this since Sam Williams. 2 X factors they picked up. They also had Tyler Barron, who ended up flipping late in the cycle. This is elite work right here just from these 2 guys, though.
Walter Nolan and Princely are incredible adds for this defense. If you want to win the SEC, if you want to win national championships, you have to be physical in the trenches. Georgia mastered it. Alabama mastered it. Other programs have found their way around it. A&M has tried to do it by bringing in those high-level recruits. Other programs, the SEC, Tennessee has tried to work on it. That's the key to success. The SEC is be dominant in the trenches, especially in the defensive side of the ball, to slow down your opponents. Ole Miss has not been able to do so, and that's why you see the teams like Alabama, LSU, Georgia beat Ole Miss over and over again. They can't seem to quite crack the code. They bring in Walter Nolan, the biggest get out of the portal, in my opinion, the best player that was available in the portal. He is a huge difference maker immediately. He has great size, great speed, just an all-around incredible athlete who slots in there perfectly. Princely coming over from Florida, another great player. He was the best player on the defensive side of the ball for me for Florida this year, and now he joins Ole Miss and adds a great impact. We knew Pete Golding was going to be able to recruit. Pete Golding was always able to bring in talent in Tuscaloosa, but there were question marks about his coaching style on the field. He has definitely lived up to the expectations and brought in the talent into Oxford. He's been an incredible recruiter and continues to be that way. Is he going to be able to get these guys to work together and be a full functioning defense that can dominate on the field? That's the question that remains to be answered.
You throw those 2 in with some returnees. Akilo Stone, he was a standout for them at 280 pounds. Xavier Harris, 6'7", 335. And that's great size. He's really going to have to improve his game this year, though. Wasn't as impactful as I thought he would be. They brought in 2 4-star freshmen in this class. They do return 2 big guys, Jared Ivey, 11.5 TFL. He was their top sack getter with 5.5 as well. He's been a really good pass rusher his entire career. Some of the bigger sized offensive linemen, though, really wiped him out in the run game. Though, he's a big returnee for them. 315-pound J.J. Pegues. He was their best run defender a season ago, second in tackles for loss. You throw all these guys I just mentioned, Nick, Ivy, Pegues, Stone, and Harris should continue to develop with those 2 massive transfers. Man, I think this might be the recipe for them to finally get over that level when it comes to defending teams against the run. And if they can't, again, Lane Kiffin's going to have a lot of questions to answer, and it seems like his ceiling may have capped out.
J.J. Pegues is a great player at defensive tackle. Jared Ivey, Xavier Harris are all really solid players where they're bringing in this additional talent. This has got to be the year for Ole Miss, the expanded playoffs, strike while the iron's hot. They brought in a lot of great defensive players. Pete Golding has a lot to prove, in my opinion. Lane Kiffin has a lot to prove. This is a big opportunity for them to do so on the defensive side of the ball against some tough opponents. The schedule is not easy for this Ole Miss team.
Obviously, the defense is more than defensive line. They get back Kari Coleman at linebacker. He's also really struggled against better competition. They rotate linebackers a good bit. They have depth at this position, but they aren't exactly up to par with the other top schools in FBS in terms of playmaking. They're going to need to see that from the middle of their defense. Chris Paul, he arrives from Arkansas, previously at USF. He's a very sound tackler, something that's certainly plagued Ole Miss over the years is missed tackles. So hoping Paul can help kind of revamp this room a little bit and kind of get them over the hump as well. Kind of, bearish on this unit. The secondary really improved. They get back safeties Trey Washington and John Saunders, who were really good in coverage, and they were sound as tacklers. Pick up Ian Banks from South Alabama, who was proven to be a great coverage corner, very underrated ad there. He wasn't as strong as he was 2 years ago, so this was kind of a quiet addition, but this is a player who has a lot of potential. I think the cornerback position has a lot to sort out, but a nice base and those three players in Washington, Sanders, and Banks. Nick, who excites you that's not on the defensive line for this defense as they look to, again, get to a level where they can compete against elite competition?
I think John Sanders is a great player that they can move around in the back end of this defense. He's a good player, good leader. Chris Paul Jr., a solid add from Arkansas. He's a nice veteran linebacker that's a hard-hitting player, a good player to add for this unit. Key Lawrence coming over from Oklahoma is a nice add at safety. He's a good physical, nice player, on good ball skills from him as well. He can slot in there at safety and play a wide range of positions. This defense has added a lot of talented players. The back end looks pretty good in my opinion.
Now, this is an Ole Miss team that, that's what they're getting right now at face value. We're going to break them down in full in a couple of months, but right now this is an offense that's incredibly exciting. I think the defensive line has a lot of potential here that can compete with almost anybody in the country if they live up to their potential. This is not an incredibly difficult schedule. They play at LSU, host Georgia and Oklahoma, play at Florida. Other than that, I'm not really seeing much that scares me. Maybe Kentucky, going on the road to Williams-Brice, if that's a night game, that could be maybe an issue. This is a team that should be in the 12-team playoff minimum, Nick, and I think they should certainly be able to compete with Georgia and Oklahoma. And if they get, completely mopped at home by the Bulldogs, that's going to be an issue. It seemed like Lane Kiffin was never going to beat Nick Saban. I mean, year after year, it seemed like he was getting close. If his defense was doing good, his offense wasn't. If the offense was, the defense was getting flat out gashed. Didn't seem like he was ever going to beat Nick Saban. And Georgia appears to be the standard in college football, Nick. That's going to be your measuring stick, at least for this season. Top 12 for me. If they don't make the playoffs, I think Kiffin, I'm not going to say his seat's getting warmer, but it definitely seems like this whole experiment at Oxford might be coming to a close.
Certainly has to make a push for the playoffs to quiet some of the doubters. Ole Miss was always a program that was sort of middle of the road, the SEC. In my opinion, Kiffin has taken his team as far as he can get them. Obviously, the expanded playoff now makes playoffs an opportunity because this team is routinely top 15, top 10 team now under Lane Kiffin. The schedule is not difficult. Non-conference is a joke. You travel to Wake. That's your only team, only Power 5 or Power 4 team on the schedule. Furman, Middle Tennessee, Georgia Southern, all easy wins. Kentucky at home, nice draw there. They get Oklahoma at home. That's a solid draw. They get Georgia at home. Their toughest games are at home other than the trip to Baton Rouge, a team that they played and went to a shootout with last year. They get Florida on the road. Florida's a mess, though. We really don't know what to expect out of them. Arkansas, same situation there. South Carolina, a lot of question marks there. So their road trips are pretty easy other than the LSU one. There's no excuses for this team with the way he's brought in. This is a schedule that they can really capitalize on and make the playoffs, and they have a great opportunity to do so in the first year of the 12-team playoff.
I think it's safe to say if this year is a failure, that Kiffin, yes, certainly is taking them as far as he can. They need to at least split the Georgia-Oklahoma games, both of them at home. If they go 0-2 in those games, Nick, it's going to be a big problem. We'll see what happens, though. Obviously, we're many months away from this, but this is a fun team that we like to discuss here today because I think that they really are one of the favorites for this conference. Very excited for what they got going on down there in Oxford. And I think in a couple of months, we'll be very high on them when we're doing our lengthy playoff predictions. Nick, closing thoughts.
I think this is a team that's heading in the right direction. The SEC getting two new teams that are very strong in Oklahoma and Texas, but Alabama lost Nick Saban. Some question marks. Georgia was not able to bring in the portal class they wanted to. Some other teams, Texas, Oklahoma, how are they going to adjust the new conference? LSU, still a lot of question marks on defense. This is a great time for Ole Miss to capitalize. They added pieces where they needed to. They strengthened the parts of their team that were weak. Another year of Pete Golding and Lane Kiffin working together, tweaking those on-field issues for the defense and offense. This team has the sky's the limits here. They could break through, certainly.
Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.